In a land where the skies were painted with swirling hues of amber and violet, there existed a village that time seemed to forget. The people of this village lived their lives as though the world beyond their borders did not exist, their routines guided by the rising and setting of the sun, and by the songs of the wind through the trees. Among them was a young man named Elian, whose curiosity always stretched beyond the familiar. He had eyes that mirrored the color of storm clouds and a mind that hungered for stories no one else dared to seek. Each evening, he would climb the ridge overlooking the valley and gaze at the distant mountains, imagining what lay beyond, wondering if the tales told by wandering travelers were more than mere fables. Elian's father, a stern man of few words, would often warn him against dreaming too far, cautioning that the world outside was cruel and unforgiving, and that longing for it could lead to disappointment. But Elian could not quell the fire within him. Every whisper of the wind seemed to carry secrets meant only for him, secrets that beckoned him to step beyond the familiar and explore the unknown. One day, while wandering near the edge of the forest that bordered their village, Elian discovered a hidden path, overgrown with brambles and shadowed by ancient oaks. It was unlike any trail he had seen before, as though it had been carved not by human hands but by some unseen force. Curiosity overpowered caution, and he began to follow it. The path twisted and turned in ways that defied logic, and as he ventured deeper, the forest seemed to breathe around him. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in shards of gold, illuminating moss-covered stones and delicate flowers that glimmered with an ethereal light. Elian felt as though he had stepped into another realm, one that existed parallel to his own but was hidden from ordinary eyes. As he walked, he encountered a small, shimmering pool at the heart of a clearing. Kneeling beside it, he peered into the water and saw not his reflection, but visions of places he had never known, vast deserts where the sand seemed to dance with colors of flame, oceans so deep they swallowed the horizon, and skies where stars clustered in patterns that told stories older than time itself. A voice, soft and melodic, seemed to rise from the water. "Elian," it whispered, "you have been chosen to seek what others cannot see." Startled, he looked around, but there was no one there. The voice continued, weaving tales of distant lands, of kingdoms that had fallen and risen again, of creatures that walked unseen alongside humans, and of a destiny that awaited him beyond the mountains. Fear and excitement mingled in his chest. The world he had known, with its predictable rhythms and familiar faces, suddenly seemed small, almost insignificant. Yet he felt a pull, a certainty that he could not ignore. By the time he returned to the village, dusk had fallen. The sky was streaked with deep purples and fiery oranges, and a chill settled over the land. Elian's father noticed the change in his son immediately, the way his eyes held a new intensity, the way his steps were lighter yet purposeful. "Where have you been?" his father asked, though he already feared the answer. Elian only smiled faintly and shook his head, feeling that words could not capture the enormity of what he had seen. That night, he lay awake, listening to the wind, imagining the places waiting for him beyond the mountains, knowing that he could not remain in the village forever. In the weeks that followed, Elian prepared for a journey that felt inevitable, as though destiny itself had set a path before him. He gathered what little provisions he could carry and studied the maps he had drawn from memory and imagination, marking places where the earth seemed to shimmer with secrets, where rivers sang songs in languages forgotten, and where mountains hid more than mere stone. Each day, he felt the forest calling him, the hidden path waiting, and the whispering water urging him onward. On the morning of his departure, the village slept under a blanket of mist. Elian stepped quietly through the streets, careful not to wake his family. He paused at the edge of the village, looking back one last time at the familiar rooftops, the smoke curling from chimneys, the field stretching into the distance, and then turned toward the mountains that had long haunted his dreams. The journey was not easy. The world beyond the village was harsh and unpredictable, full of storms that seemed to rise without warning, of forests so dense that the sunlight never touched the ground, and of rivers that roared with a power that tested his courage. Yet each challenge strengthened him, teaching him to listen to the language of the wind, to read the signs in the stars, and to trust the instincts that had guided him since childhood. Along the way, he encountered others, travelers, exiles, and wanderers, each with stories of sorrow, triumph, and strange magic. They became companions, teachers, and sometimes adversaries, shaping the path that Elian walked and expanding his understanding of the vast, intricate world beyond the village. Days bled into nights as Elian traversed mountains, valleys, and forests, each step taking him farther from the world he had once known and deeper into the mysteries whispered to him by the wind. One evening, as the sun sank behind jagged cliffs, painting the sky in shades of molten gold and deep crimson, he came upon a village unlike any he had seen before. The buildings were crafted from crystal and stone, glinting in the dying light, and the air was filled with the hum of strange, melodious music. People moved with a grace that seemed otherworldly, their eyes reflecting the colors of the sky and the depths of the forest. Curiosity piqued, Elian approached cautiously, feeling the pull of something powerful yet gentle emanating from this place. A woman stepped forward, her hair cascading like silver rivers, her eyes holding centuries of wisdom. She regarded Elian with a mixture of curiosity and recognition. "You have come far, seeker," she said, her voice resonating in the air like a soft chime. "The path you walk is not for the faint of heart. Few reach this place, and fewer still carry the resolve to continue." Elian felt a shiver run down his spine. Somehow, she knew. He nodded, unsure if words could convey the fire that drove him onward. "I must continue," he said simply, his voice steady despite the awe he felt. She studied him for a long moment, then motioned for him to follow. She led him through winding streets, past fountains that shimmered with light and trees that sang in low, haunting melodies. They arrived at a grand hall, its walls etched with patterns that seemed to move and shift as one looked upon them. "This is the Hall of Passage," the woman explained. "Here, the choices you make will shape not only your path but the world itself. Some doors lead to places of great wonder, others to trials that may break even the strongest of spirits. You must choose wisely, for every decision echoes beyond the present." Elian's heart pounded as he stepped into the hall. Doors of all shapes and sizes lined the walls, each radiating a distinct energy, some warm and inviting, others cold and foreboding. The woman handed him a small, intricately carved compass, its needle spinning wildly before settling. "Let this guide you," she said. "It will not point north, but to what your soul most needs to see." Taking the compass, Elian felt a surge of purpose. He knew that the path forward would demand more than courage. It would require insight, empathy, and the willingness to confront truths about himself that he had long avoided. The first door he chose led him to a forest that seemed alive with a consciousness of its own. Trees whispered in languages he did not understand, and shadows moved with intent, sometimes appearing as creatures of imagination, other times as echoes of memory. Here, he faced trials that tested his spirit, illusions that preyed upon his deepest fears, visions that forced him to confront moments of weakness and doubt, and challenges that demanded both intellect and intuition. Time itself seemed distorted, with days and nights folding into each other in unpredictable ways. Through patience, reflection, and a growing understanding of his own inner strength, Elian navigated the forest, emerging not only unscathed but profoundly changed. Beyond the forest lay a vast desert under a sky strewn with stars so numerous they seemed to form a living tapestry. The sand stretched endlessly, shimmering with faint, spectral lights that danced upon the dunes. Here, the compass guided him to an oasis, a place of respite and revelation. In the stillness, he encountered a being of radiant light, neither male nor female, whose presence conveyed both warmth and infinite knowledge. Elian, it spoke without words, the meaning resonating directly within his mind: "You seek to understand the world and your place within it. Yet the journey is not only outward but inward. To walk the path fully, you must reconcile the light and darkness within yourself. Only then can the destiny that awaits you unfold." The words lingered in his consciousness long after the being had faded, leaving a profound sense of clarity. Elian realized that his journey was not simply a quest to see new lands or experience wonders. It was a journey of self-discovery, of understanding the complexities of life, of learning that courage is measured not in the absence of fear but in the willingness to act despite it. With renewed resolve, he continued, crossing the desert toward mountains that rose like titans on the horizon, their peaks hidden by clouds that glowed with strange, otherworldly light. Along the way, he encountered other travelers, each carrying burdens of their own. Some sought knowledge, others redemption, and a few were driven by desperation. Elian learned to listen deeply, to offer guidance where he could, and to recognize that even the smallest act of kindness could ripple outward in ways unseen. He faced moments of doubt, questioning whether the path he walked truly led anywhere or if it was merely an endless series of trials. Yet the compass, steady and unwavering, reminded him of the purpose that had brought him this far. With each step, he felt the invisible threads of destiny drawing him closer to a revelation he could not yet comprehend, yet sensed with every fiber of his being. As Elian approached the towering mountains, the air grew thinner, carrying a crispness that bit at his skin and filled his lungs with icy clarity. The peaks seemed impossibly high, their summits shrouded in mist that glowed faintly with colors that shifted like oil on water. Each step upward tested not only his physical endurance but his determination. At times, he stumbled on loose stones or slipped across frozen patches, yet he never allowed despair to root itself in his heart. The compass guided him steadily, its needle unwavering despite the treacherous terrain, a reminder that the path he walked was more than a physical journey, it was a quest of spirit, mind, and soul. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to shimmer against the deepening twilight, Elian discovered a cave carved into the mountain's side. Its entrance pulsed with a faint, golden light, beckoning him closer. Inside, the walls were lined with crystals that reflected and multiplied the light, creating an effect as though the cave itself were alive with stars. He felt a profound stillness here, a quiet that demanded contemplation. In the center of the cavern was a pool of water, perfectly still, yet shimmering with an inner glow. As Elian approached, he saw his reflection, but it was not the reflection he expected. Instead of the young man who had left his village weeks ago, he saw someone older, wiser, and infinitely more aware of both light and shadow within himself. The voice returned, softer this time, more intimate. Elian, you have come far, yet the greatest challenges are yet ahead. The world you know is but a fragment of what exists. Beyond these mountains lie realms shaped by intention and memory, where reality bends to thought and will. To proceed, you must embrace not only your strengths but your vulnerabilities, for only in understanding both can you transcend the ordinary. The words echoed through the cave, vibrating within Elian's chest. He understood that the path beyond the mountains would demand not just courage or knowledge, but a deep reconciliation with himself, a willingness to confront truths he had avoided for all his life. The next morning, he began the ascent to the highest peak. The climb was grueling, with sheer cliffs, sudden drops, and icy gusts that threatened to sweep him off his feet. He relied on his instincts, honed through weeks of travel, and on the lessons learned from the forests, deserts, and villages he had traversed. Along the way, he encountered creatures both wondrous and terrifying, winged serpents that glimmered in the sunlight, ethereal beings that spoke in melodic tones without words, and shadows that challenged his courage at every turn. Each encounter tested his resolve, his patience, and his understanding of the delicate balance between fear and action, trust and caution. At the summit, Elian found a plateau that overlooked a landscape more vast and varied than any he had imagined. Valleys stretched beyond valleys, rivers wound like silver threads through forests, and cities of light glimmered in the distance, as though the stars themselves had descended to inhabit the earth. At the center of the plateau stood an obelisk, carved with symbols that seemed to shift and dance when viewed from different angles. The compass in his hand pointed unwaveringly toward it. As he approached, the obelisk began to hum, resonating with the energy he had cultivated through his journey. Placing his hand upon its surface, Elian was engulfed in a vision of the world as it had been, as it was, and as it could be. He saw civilizations rise and fall, seas churn with life and destruction, mountains crumble and reform. He saw moments of profound beauty and acts of unspeakable cruelty, all intertwined in a tapestry of existence that was neither wholly good nor wholly evil, but balanced in ways beyond comprehension. In that moment, he understood that the journey he had undertaken was not merely to witness the world but to recognize his own role within it, to grasp the responsibility carried by those who walk paths of awareness and choice. As the vision receded, Elian felt a profound sense of calm. He realized that the anger and fear he had once felt, both in himself and imagined from the world beyond, were illusions, reflections of uncertainty rather than truth. The challenges he had faced, the companions he had met, the trials and revelations all coalesced into understanding that the universe was vast, mysterious, and often harsh, yet it was also shaped by intention, compassion, and insight. To act with clarity, to move forward with awareness, was the essence of purpose. The descent from the mountains was markedly different from the climb. Though the path was physically the same, Elian's perception had shifted. Valleys that once seemed daunting were now landscapes of possibility. Forests whispered with guidance rather than challenge. Rivers reflected the sky and his own evolving understanding. Along the way, he helped others he encountered, sharing knowledge, offering counsel, and learning anew that wisdom grows not in isolation but through connection. By the time he reached the plains beyond, he had transformed from the young man who had left his village into someone who carried both the memory of his past and the insight of his journey. The compass, once a guiding tool, now rested quietly in his hand, no longer spinning or demanding attention. He realized that he had internalized its guidance. The direction had always been within him, nurtured through choice, courage, and reflection. As Elian continued across the plains, he encountered a river that shimmered like molten silver under the noon sun. Its currents twisted and turned in unpredictable ways, and it was said by those who had glimpsed it from afar to be alive with memory, carrying the essence of all who had traveled its waters. Elian paused at the edge, sensing that this river was unlike any he had known. It was not merely a path but a reflection of choices, both past and potential. Stepping cautiously into the shallows, he felt the water embrace him, guiding his steps as he moved along the current. Each ripple seemed to whisper fragments of forgotten truths, stories of civilizations long lost, and visions of lives intertwined with his own in ways he could not yet comprehend. Midway along the river, he met an old man whose eyes held the depth of centuries. The man's presence was quiet yet commanding, as though he existed in a different rhythm of time. "Traveler," he said, voice soft but firm, "this river carries what you seek, yet it will not grant it lightly. To pass, you must confront that which you fear most within yourself. Only in embracing it will you find passage." Elian nodded, though uncertainty gripped his heart. He realized that each stage of his journey had prepared him for this moment, and that the true trial was not external but internal. The river shimmered, reflecting not his outward form but the fears, doubts, and regrets he had carried since childhood. As he walked deeper into the current, he relived moments of weakness, times he had failed those who trusted him, moments when fear had dictated his choices, and instances where his own ambition had overshadowed compassion. The visions were vivid, almost overwhelming, but he forced himself to confront them without turning away. With each acknowledgement of guilt or fear, the water seemed to grow warmer, more welcoming, as if approving his acceptance. By the time he reached the riverbank on the far side, he felt unburdened, lighter, and more whole than he had ever known. The old man smiled knowingly and disappeared into the mist, leaving Elian with a profound sense of clarity. Beyond the river lay a forest of towering crystalline trees, their branches refracting light into infinite patterns. The forest was quiet, yet it vibrated with the energy of untold stories. Each step Elian took seemed to awaken echoes of the past, voices, laughter, cries, that interwove into a tapestry of memory and experience. He wandered through this forest for days, guided by instinct and the subtle pull of the compass, which now seemed almost sentient, adjusting itself to the rhythm of his heart. In this place, he encountered beings of both light and shadow, creatures that challenged his perceptions of morality, illusions that tested his understanding of reality, and companions who offered wisdom without speaking a single word. Each interaction expanded his awareness, revealing the complex interdependence of all life and the subtle threads that connected every action to consequence. One night, under a sky filled with swirling constellations unlike any he had seen before, Elian sat beside a fire that burned with colors unseen. As he meditated, visions of a great city emerged from the flames, a city of towers reaching beyond clouds, streets that shimmered with knowledge and culture, and people who moved with purpose and joy. Yet beneath the splendor lay a shadow, a hidden turmoil, conflicts unresolved, and suffering unnoticed. He realized that this city represented not only a place in the world but a state of being, an embodiment of the balance between growth and decay, wisdom and ignorance, compassion and apathy. Understanding this duality became a revelation, teaching him that perfection was neither attainable nor desirable. What mattered was intention, awareness, and action guided by conscience. As dawn broke, Elian continued his journey, the forest gradually giving way to rolling hills and plains dotted with unusual flora that seemed to hum in harmony with the earth. Along the way, he found remnants of ancient civilizations, ruins partially reclaimed by nature, inscriptions in unknown languages, and artifacts that bore witness to the passage of time. He studied these relics with reverence, sensing that the knowledge they contained was not merely historical but alive, waiting for those willing to engage with it. Each discovery strengthened his resolve and deepened his understanding of the intricate web of life, knowledge, and experience that spanned both time and space. Eventually, he arrived at a valley filled with mist so dense it was almost tangible. Through it, he glimpsed a monastery perched upon a cliff, its towers rising above the fog like silent sentinels. Monks and scholars moved gracefully within its walls, their presence radiating calm and authority. Welcomed by the head of the monastery, a woman whose eyes seemed to hold galaxies within them, Elian was offered shelter and wisdom. Here, he learned that knowledge was not merely about observation or memory, but about integration, allowing the lessons of the world, the trials faced, and the experiences lived to converge within oneself and guide future choices. For months, he trained, meditated, and studied, each day revealing deeper truths about the cosmos, life, and his own evolving consciousness. By the time he left the monastery, Elian was no longer the boy who had climbed the ridge of his village. He carried within him the essence of countless experiences, the wisdom of those he had met, and the understanding that the journey itself was a living entity, ever shaping, ever expanding. Beyond the valley stretched uncharted lands, realms of possibility that beckoned with the same quiet insistence he had felt from the start. He understood now that the path would never truly end. Every step was both destination and beginning, every encounter both challenge and revelation. Beyond the valley, the land changed yet again. Hills gave way to vast plains where the grass shimmered with a silvery hue, as if dusted by starlight even in daylight. The air was filled with the hum of unseen insects and the faint whisper of distant voices carried by the wind. Elian walked for hours, each step feeling simultaneously heavier and lighter, as though the world itself acknowledged the weight of his experiences while rewarding his resolve with freedom. The compass in his hand, though no longer spinning, pulsed faintly as if affirming his direction, urging him toward something both distant and inevitable. One evening, he came upon a caravan of travelers, each cloaked in garments that seemed woven from the night sky. They welcomed him with warmth, offering food and shelter without question. Around their fire, they shared stories of distant lands, realms where the mountains floated like islands in the sky, where oceans glowed with living light, and where time itself bent to the will of those who truly understood its flow. Elian listened intently, recognizing that these tales were not merely entertainment but lessons in perception, patience, and the interconnectedness of all things. He realized that the journey was not solely about physical exploration, but about cultivating the capacity to perceive hidden truths, to embrace paradox, and to act with wisdom. The travelers spoke of a place called the Vale of Echoes, where every thought, every emotion, and every memory manifested as a tangible presence. Few had ventured there and returned unchanged. The compass seemed to tremble in Elian's hand as if acknowledging the significance of the place. Guided by both instinct and the quiet urging of the travelers, he set out toward the vale, moving through landscapes that defied ordinary understanding. Forests twisted into impossible geometries, rivers flowed uphill and then vanished into thin air, and the horizon shimmered as though reality itself were a mirage. Each obstacle tested not only his resilience but his perception, forcing him to question assumptions, confront biases, and navigate challenges that required insight rather than brute force. Upon reaching the vale, Elian was struck by its eerie beauty. The ground shimmered as if covered by liquid crystal, reflecting the sky and everything within it with startling clarity. Every sound, movement, and thought seemed to ripple outward, creating echoes that shaped the environment itself. As he walked, memories of his village, of his parents, of every companion and adversary he had encountered, materialized around him. Shadows of past fears appeared, as did glowing representations of triumphs and acts of compassion. At first, the experience overwhelmed him. The multiplicity of self, past and present, was a torrent of sensation. Yet gradually, through deep focus and acceptance, he learned to navigate the veil, recognizing that each reflection was a facet of himself and that understanding them was crucial to progressing on his journey. In the heart of the veil, he encountered a being both magnificent and terrifying, composed of shifting forms and radiant light. Elian, it spoke, its voice echoing in 1,000 harmonies. You have traversed lands of wonder and peril, faced fears and embraced insight, yet your journey is not complete. To continue, you must integrate all that you have learned and accept the totality of yourself, the light, the shadow, the doubt, and the certainty. Only then can you move beyond the known and step into true understanding. The words resonated within him, touching every corner of his consciousness. He realized that the trials he had faced were not merely steps along a path but instruments of transformation, shaping him into someone capable of perceiving and engaging with the world at a level he had never imagined. Emerging from the veil, Elian's perception of the world had irrevocably shifted. Ordinary landscapes now held layers of meaning. Every encounter revealed hidden possibilities, and every action carried weight beyond immediate consequence. He traveled onward, crossing deserts where the sand whispered forgotten songs, mountains where the wind carried ancient prophecies, and forests that hummed with living memory. Along the way, he encountered beings who challenged his assumptions, offering puzzles, guidance, and lessons in ways that demanded both humility and discernment. Each interaction deepened his understanding, teaching him that wisdom is not the accumulation of facts but the ability to perceive connections, act with clarity, and remain steadfast in the face of uncertainty. One twilight, as he rested beside a river that reflected the stars with uncanny precision, Elian contemplated the journey that had brought him from the ridge overlooking his village to this place of profound awareness. He understood that the world was neither simple nor entirely knowable, but that the pursuit of understanding, guided by courage, reflection, and compassion, was itself a form of mastery. The compass, once a tool for direction, now felt like a symbol of his inner alignment, a reminder that true guidance comes from within, shaped by experience, insight, and intention. With renewed determination, he set his gaze toward the horizon, ready to embrace the next stage of a journey that promised revelations beyond imagination, challenges that would test the limits of his spirit, and the unfolding of a destiny that was at once personal and universal. As Elian pressed onward, the landscape began to shift in ways both subtle and profound. Rolling plains gave way to jagged cliffs, and the sky seemed to change its hue with every step, cycling through colors unseen in any ordinary spectrum. The air itself felt charged, vibrating with an energy that resonated deep within his bones. Though the terrain was treacherous, he felt no fear. The trials of the Vale of Echoes had imbued him with a steadiness of mind that allowed him to navigate even the most perilous paths with clarity and intention. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured, as though the very act of moving forward was an exercise in alignment with the universe itself. One morning, he encountered a dense forest unlike any he had traversed before. The trees were impossibly tall, their trunks woven with patterns that seemed to shift when observed directly. Leaves glimmered like gemstones, and the canopy was so thick that only scattered shafts of light reached the forest floor. As he ventured inside, he realized that this was a place of reflection as much as of passage. The forest seemed to mirror his thoughts and emotions, amplifying them until he could no longer ignore their presence. Shadows of doubt appeared, whispering fears from his earliest days, and beams of light revealed his most cherished memories, the moments that had shaped his understanding of courage, love, and responsibility. Deep within this forest, he encountered a creature of immense presence. Its body shimmered between solidity and vapor, shifting forms as it spoke. "Elian," it said, voice like wind through chimes, "you have traversed lands of wonder, deserts of reflection, mountains of endurance, and a veil that mirrors the soul. Yet the greatest trial is not of the world outside, but of the spirit within. To proceed, you must confront the limitations you have placed upon yourself and the truths you have not yet fully embraced. Only through this confrontation can the path beyond be revealed." The words resonated in him, stirring both apprehension and determination. Over the next several days, Elian moved through the forest in a state of deep introspection. Each challenge was internal, moments where fear of failure threatened to paralyze him, memories of past mistakes that begged for reconciliation, and visions of futures both possible and impossible. He faced illusions that tempted him with comfort or recognition, yet he resisted the ease of illusion, understanding that the trials were designed to teach discernment, patience, and the courage to act despite uncertainty. With each confrontation, the forest shifted subtly, becoming less oppressive, more luminous, as if acknowledging his growing understanding and integration of self. Emerging from the forest, he entered a vast expanse of mirrored plains. The ground reflected the sky so perfectly that he could not distinguish where the earth ended and the heavens began. Here, the compass began to vibrate faintly, guiding him toward a distant structure that shimmered on the horizon. As he approached, he realized it was a citadel of light, floating above the plains, held aloft by energies that defied conventional understanding. The air around it hummed with the resonance of knowledge and power, and he felt a magnetic pull, as though every fiber of his being was drawn to the place. Ascending toward the citadel required crossing bridges of energy, narrow and shifting, suspended above the mirrored plains. Each step demanded focus, courage, and balance. One misstep could plunge him into the reflective expanse below, where he would be confronted not with death but with a mirror of his own unresolved fears. The journey across these bridges was a test of composure and awareness, forcing him to integrate lessons from forests, deserts, mountains, and the Vale. By the time he reached the citadel, he felt a unity of mind and spirit that he had not known before, a coherence that allowed him to move with purpose even amid uncertainty. Inside the citadel, the walls glowed with patterns of light that conveyed information directly into his consciousness. Here, knowledge and understanding were not merely read or heard, they were felt, absorbed, and comprehended at a level beyond language. Elian spent time in contemplation, walking through halls that responded to his thoughts, meditating in chambers where the very air carried insight, and encountering beings of pure light who offered guidance, challenge, and companionship. In this place, he realized that the universe was a network of interwoven truths, and that wisdom was not merely the accumulation of facts, but the ability to perceive patterns, discern meaning, and act in harmony with principles greater than oneself. After what felt like both days and lifetimes within the citadel, he emerged onto a balcony that overlooked a landscape of infinite possibility. Valleys, mountains, oceans, and skies stretched beyond comprehension, each element pulsing with life and interconnection. The compass, now quiet and still, rested in his hand, a symbol not of direction but of internal alignment. Elian understood that the journey was never truly about reaching a destination, it was about transformation, the integration of experience, insight, and intention into a cohesive understanding of self and world. With a deep breath, he prepared to continue, knowing that beyond the citadel lay realms even more mysterious, challenges even more profound, and revelations that would further expand his consciousness.